This is a story from my summer vacation when I was in my first year of junior high. Usually, my parents, sister, and I would spend a few days staying at a relative's house in the countryside. However, that year, my sister was in a traffic accident, so my mom stayed behind to care for her, and it was just my dad and me who made the trip. After arriving at our relative's house, I didn't feel like staying around my dad or the other relatives, partly because I was going through a rebellious phase. So, I decided to take a walk by myself around the area until it was time for dinner. I had been coming to this village since I was in elementary school, so I was familiar with the neighborhood. Still, I remembered that every time we visited, the adults would always say, "Children must never go to a shrine." A shrine was very old, but I had never been there. When I once asked my dad why, he simply said, "It's not a place you should go until you're an adult." This only made me more curious. I really wanted to go, but I was also scared to go alone, and I wasn't sure what to do when suddenly BKO came up to me. BKO was a girl who lived nearby, and since we were about the same age, we always played together when I visited. I told her about a shrine, and she suggested we gather the neighborhood kids and do a test of courage. That night, at around 11 p.m., we snuck out while the adults were busy drinking. I headed to our meeting spot where BKO, along with two boys I'd met a few times before, Sichan and Dichan, were waiting. Dichan had also brought his younger sister, EKO. It turned out that everyone had been curious about a shrine and wanted to visit at least once. A shrine was about a 20-minute walk from our relative's village, up towards the mountains. We didn't know the exact location since the adults always stopped us. But living here, we had a rough idea of where it might be. We decided to quickly check it out and return before the adults noticed we were gone. As we made our way toward the shrine, I felt a mixture of excitement and fear. I kept reassuring myself that the adults probably just said it was dangerous because it was in the mountains, and they didn't want children wandering off alone. But when we finally arrived at what we thought was a shrine, and I saw the old, dilapidated torii gate, I immediately regretted coming. The atmosphere was unsettling. I wanted to turn back, but BKO and Sichan kept moving forward, so I reluctantly followed. The shrine was tiny. Once you passed through the torii gate, there was a small shrine building only a couple of meters away. BKO, sounding disappointed, said, "Huh, is this all there is?" Sichan, unfazed, said, "This isn't scary at all." Dichan added, "Let's go home." BKO, too, was worried, saying, "We'll get in trouble if we don't go back." I was about to agree with Dichan and EKO, but before I could, Sichan, without warning, opened the shrine's door. He leaned in to peek inside, but then suddenly screamed, clutched his throat, and collapsed, rolling on the ground. None of us understood what was happening. Sichan kept groaning, "Ugh, ugh," as he clawed at his throat, scratching it until it bled. We were all frozen in shock, but EKO suddenly ran back down the path, shouting, "I'm getting Grandpa." Dichan, worried for her, said he'd go with her, leaving me and BKO to stay with Sichan and try to stop him from hurting himself further. Though Sichan was younger and thinner than us, his strength was terrifying. We tried to hold his arms down, but he kept throwing us off. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps approaching. Dichan and EKO had returned, along with their grandfather, Efsan. When Efsan saw Sichan, he immediately shouted, "It's the Nodagami-sama." He quickly told Dichan, "Go to the village head's house and fetch Grandma." Then he turned to us and said, "EKO, you and the others go home. Grandma will take care of this." Though I was worried about Sichan, Efsan's commanding voice, and the fear of the situation made us obey. We headed back to our houses. When I returned to my relative's home, everyone already knew what had happened. My dad was furious. "How many times were you told not to go there?" He scolded me. I felt guilty, thinking it was all my fault that Sichan ended up like that. Through my tears, one of my relatives tried to console me, saying, "We didn't explain things properly. Sio got bitten by the Nodagami-sama, but don't worry, Grandma will handle it." I asked what Nodagami-sama was. They explained that the name means throat-biting deity. The story goes that a long time ago, a mother and child, who were discriminated against by the villagers, starved to death. As the child lay dying, they cursed the villagers, saying, "I'll bite their throats so they'll never be able to eat, and they'll suffer like I did." Afterward, children in the village began dying mysteriously, scratching at their throats until they bled. A traveling priest came to the village and sealed the mother and child's bones in the shrine's hokora, small shrine building, to put an end to the curse. Since then, it became a taboo for children to go near a shrine. However, if a child opened the shrine, as Sichan had, they would fall under the curse. Only adults could visit the shrine safely, and the village's grandma was a descendant of the priest who sealed the curse, tasked with protecting the village and dealing with incidents like this. It all sounded unbelievable, but after witnessing Sichan's behavior, I couldn't help but believe it. Although my dad and relatives reassured me that grandma would take care of things, I couldn't sleep that night, and morning eventually came. Just as I was starting to calm down, there was a knock at the door. I thought it might be grandma, and when I opened the door, there she was. She simply said, "Sichan made it in time. Don't go back there. You must never open that place until you're older." Later that day, my dad arranged for us to return home. Ever since that incident, even when I visit the countryside, I only stay for half a day before returning with one of my parents. BKO, Dichan, and EKO were all scolded for going to a shrine, and after that, the adults kept a close watch to make sure no other children went near it. Sichan spent some time in the hospital, but he eventually recovered, with no scars left on his throat. A shrine and the hokora are still in that same place, but since that night, I've never gone near it, not even as an adult. It wasn't a dream. It's a memory that's still burned into my mind as something that truly happened.